My fiancé raised. A toast at our engagement party, the room froze, and a hotel folio exposed. A wedding week overlap just as my sister quit defending him. And the venue manager rechecked our deposit on the spot. I was already halfway through, pretending the night felt normal, when Nolan picked up his champagne and tapped the glass. That was the cue, our cue. The little pause before the engagement party toast, where everyone turned toward us and smiled like the hard part was over. We were on a rooftop lounge downtown, all low gold lights and too much polished brass, the kind of place that made every family photo look expensive, even when nobody felt calm. My sister Lena had been glued to Nolan's side most of the night, in that way people do when they think they're helping, smoothing over little things before the bride notices. I had noticed anyway. Nolan cleared his throat, smiled at the room, and said, "I know everybody thinks tonight is about the ring, but honestly..." Then the venue manager stepped in beside him with a slim black folder and said, too softly into the microphone, "Hush. Sorry. I just need a quick signature on the deposit revision and this folio that got clipped into your event file by mistake." That word hit wrong before I even saw the paper. Folio. Nolan looked down. I watched the smile leave his face in a way he tried to disguise by laughing first. Not a real laugh, one of those short, airless ones. The manager opened the folder because he clearly thought this was nothing, just paperwork, and the top page was a hotel folio with Nolan's full name on it and a room charge from Tuesday of last week, 2 nights, 1 king bed, early check-in approved. Tuesday of last week was supposed to be the day he told me he was with his cousin, helping move rental chairs from his aunt's garage. The whole room didn't gasp or anything dramatic. It was worse than that. People just stopped, glasses lowered. Somebody near the bar set down a fork too hard. The music was still going, but too far away to save anything. Nolan reached for the page and said, "That's not hang on. Why is that here?" The manager blinked. It was mixed into the envelope from the attached hotel desk. "I'm sorry. I thought it was part of the billing packet." "It isn't," Nolan said quickly. He still hadn't looked at me. Lena had. That was the first thing that made my stomach turn for real. 5 minutes earlier, she'd been whispering that I needed to stop reading meaning into every odd thing this week, that Nolan was stressed, that wedding logistics made everybody weird, that I was about to ruin my own engagement party by showing up already suspicious. But when she saw the page, she didn't even try to give me that look again. Her face just flattened, not shocked, not exactly, more like something had lined up in her head faster than she wanted it to. Nolan lifted his glass higher, like he could restart the moment by force. "Can we not do admin in the middle of this?" The manager, embarrassed now, pulled the folder back a little. "Of course, I apologize. I only needed the revised deposit initials because the balance transfer posted late. That should have been the part I cared about. The deposit, the venue, real money, a real contract." Instead, all I could see was Nolan's name typed clean across the top of a hotel document that had no business being near our party, unless somebody in the attached property had bundled it with the event file. Same logo. Same parent venue group. Same awful bad luck. Or not bad luck. That was the problem. I said, "Tuesday." Not loudly. It still carried. Nolan finally looked at me. "Babe, let me see it." "You know what day it is without seeing it." He swallowed. "I know I didn't book a room last week." Lena cut in too fast. There are a million reasons his name could be on something. I turned to her. "You were just telling me I was being paranoid. I'm still telling you not to do this in front of everyone." That was the first shift. Not from him, from her. A minute ago, she was defending him like it was automatic. Now it sounded like she was defending the shape of the evening, which is different. It's what people do when they stop believing a person is clean, but still want the mess contained. Nolan set his drink down so hard it clicked against the tray table. "Can I just look at the page?" The manager hesitated, then handed it over, because what else was he supposed to do now? Nolan scanned it too quickly. I saw his thumb cover part of the line items. Room rate, taxes, early check-in, valet, no second guest listed. That almost helped him, which is why I hated that my brain noticed it. A folio like that didn't prove what everyone immediately thought it proved. It just made the room picture the same thing all at once. He said, This is from the Harbour Annex. I had a meeting there. At a hotel? I asked. It has conference rooms. It also has king rooms. Don't, he said quietly. That got everyone quieter. The manager took one step back. I can come back later about the deposit. There it was again. Deposit. As if the universe wanted to tie the question of whether my fiancé had booked a hotel room during our wedding week to the fact that our venue could freeze everything if signatures shifted tonight. I could feel guests trying not to look at me directly. It made it worse when they looked away. A few of Nolan's work friends suddenly found their phones interesting. My aunt near the rail started whispering to her husband. The room was no longer ours. It had become an audience. I held my hand out. Let me see. Nolan didn't move. Lena said, Claire. That was the tone she used when we were kids, and she thought I was about to embarrass the family in public, not save myself, not protect myself, just embarrass us. I felt something sharp and hot go through me because suddenly I wasn't only looking at Nolan. I was looking at the person who had spent the last week telling me his schedule gaps were normal, that men about to get married disappeared into stupid errands all the time, that I needed to stop acting like every late reply meant some other woman. Nolan, I said, give me the page. He handed it to me, but late enough to matter. The date was Tuesday, exactly where I thought. Check-in at 3:14 p.m. Early arrival approved. 1 king, 2 knights. The attached signature field showed a digital initial I, recognized because I'd watched him sign vendor forms all month. N.R. He said, I can explain that. I looked up. Then explain why Tuesday afternoon you were texting me photos from your aunt's garage. I was there first. Lena inhaled, tiny sound, but I heard it. Not because she was shocked, because she already knew enough to understand that answer was bad. Nobody moved for a second after he said it. Not because the answer made sense, because it didn't, and everybody there knew it without needing me to say it first. I was there first, just sat in the air between us, like he'd tossed out the wrong card and hoped nobody noticed. If he had said the folio was fraud, I could have grabbed onto that. If he had said his boss booked a room block under his name by mistake, maybe half the room would have nodded and given him space to walk it back. But instead, he had placed himself at both locations on the same day and acted like that solved something. Lena stepped toward me before I could answer. Claire, not here. I didn't even look at her. Not here is how I got here. Nolan rubbed the back of his neck, then straightened when he realized how guilty that looked. Can we go somewhere private for 2 minutes? That would have been reasonable if the damage hadn't already happened in public. But asking for privacy after the room had seen the document felt less like respect and more like containment. I could feel people pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. The manager cleared his throat. I'm very sorry. I can step away and return after the toast. We still need the revised deposit initials before the event closeout posts tonight. He looked miserable, and I almost felt bad for him. Almost. His practical little sentence about closeout posting somehow made the paper in my hand feel even more official. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't a friend forwarding me a blurry screenshot. This was a document that had physically travelled through the same administrative pipeline as our engagement party. Nolan said, Lower now. Claire, please. Who were you meeting? It was work. You said your aunt's garage. That was before. Before what? Before I had to go. He kept choosing verbs that moved without explaining. Had to go, work thing, meeting. All of it sounded like he thought speed could substitute for shape. Lena pressed her lips together and looked at him, then at me. That look changed again. I knew my sister well enough to track the math on her face. She wasn't deciding whether he was innocent anymore. She was deciding how much of this she could survive being attached to. That hurt more than I wanted it to. She had spent all week telling me wedding pressure was making me dramatic. She had said Nolan was still showing up, still answering eventually, still paying for things, still talking about the future, as if loyalty could be measured by whether the florist invoice got paid on time. Now she wouldn't even meet my eye for more than a second. I lifted the folio and read from it, because once I started, I couldn't stop. Check-in approved at 3:14, 2 nights, king room. Nolan held out his hand again. Don't do that. Why? It's printed. A couple standing near the champagne tower turned away too fast, the kind of body movement people make when they want credit for discretion after already hearing everything important. My chest felt tight, but my voice was calmer than I felt. That made me sound cold. I knew it. I also knew people would use that later. Maybe some of them would say I had been waiting for a reason to blow up. Maybe I had been waiting. That was one of the ugliest parts. The folio didn't land on neutral ground. It landed on a week of small absences, strange mood swings, and one specific Tuesday when Nolan had taken forever to answer simple questions, then overcompensated with too many details. I remembered exactly what he texted me that day because I had reread it on the train to the venue. Your aunt has so much junk, lol. Chairs are filthy. Might be late. That stupid fake light message people send when they're trying to sound casual inside a lie. Lena finally said, the room type doesn't prove anything. I looked at her then. You know that's not what I asked. I'm saying don't jump from a hotel document to… She stopped short. To what? To another woman? To a bed? To wedding week cheating? She didn't finish because the room had already finished it for her. Nolan latched onto that opening immediately. Exactly. It doesn't prove what you're making it mean. That was the second turn. He wasn't denying the hotel anymore. Not clearly. He had moved to arguing interpretation. It was subtle, and maybe half the people there missed it, but I didn't. He had gone from, I didn't book a room, to this doesn't prove what you think. My stomach dropped lower. I said, so you were there? For a meeting. For 2 nights. He exhaled hard. I didn't stay 2 nights. Then why is there a 2-night charge? I don't know. Maybe it was held. Maybe it auto-posted. Can I please have one conversation with you that isn't a performance? That line might have helped him if he had said it earlier, before the entire rooftop watched him try on 3 versions of the truth in under 2 minutes. Now it sounded like a man mad that the timing was bad, not a man blindsided by a lie. The manager shifted from one foot to the other. I can have accounting clarify whether that folio was finalized or pre-authorized. Nolan snapped. No, that won't be necessary. Again, too fast. Lena flinched at the tone. So did I. Not because it was loud, but because it made his priorities visible. Not fix it, not explain it. Stop the paper from hardening. I folded the folio once, carefully, and handed the black folder back to the manager. You should probably keep all billing documents together. Nolan looked at me like I had slapped him. The manager nodded, relieved to be given a procedural role again. Of course. That was when Lena caught my wrist. Not hard, just enough. Claire, she said under her breath, do not force this in front of the venue. If they think there's instability, they will get weird about the contract. There it was, her real fear. Not my heartbreak, not even Nolan, the optics, the paperwork. The fact that if tonight tipped from embarrassing to volatile, the venue might tighten every clause we hadn't paid enough attention to. I pulled my arm back. You told me I was imagining things. I told you not to build a case out of gaps. You were wrong. Her jaw tightened. Maybe, but you don't know enough yet. That should have sounded like comfort. Instead, it sounded like she knew exactly how much enough would be. I stared at her. What does that mean? Nolan stepped between us without fully stepping between us, that irritating half-position people take when they want to control a scene while pretending to calm it. It means everybody needs to stop. Did you tell her something? I asked. No. Lena? She looked away first. That was worse than if she had lied smoothly. Smooth lies are at least clean. Hesitation is intimate. Hesitation means there are pieces, maybe not the whole thing, maybe not even the worst thing, but enough to turn your own sister into someone managing you instead of standing with you. Across the room, a server began quietly removing untouched appetizer plates, as if the evening could be reset by clearing surfaces. It made the humiliation sharper. Real life never pauses for your disaster. It just keeps polishing glasses around it. Nolan lowered his voice to that private tone he used when he wanted me to feel unreasonable. You are spiraling. I almost laughed. You had a hotel folio in your event file, and you are making that mean exactly what you want it to mean. Maybe I was. Maybe I was filling in the ugliest version because it fit too well, but he still wasn't giving me a better one. He was only criticizing the speed of my conclusion, not the facts under it. The manager, still hovering because contracts do not care about shame, said quietly, "Miss Harper, I do need your signature if the revised deposit method remains the same. Mine, not ours. Mine, because the deposit card had been mine." I turned toward him. Soft shift again, from betrayal to paper, from fiancé to money, from public humiliation to the practical knowledge that my card was sitting under an event tied to a man who might have spent wedding week checking into a hotel under his own name and then lying to me about where he was. Nolan saw the thought land. "Claire, don't." But by then, I wasn't looking at him anymore. I was looking at Lena, who had gone pale in that specific way people do when they realize the person in danger of being cornered is no longer the one they expected. I took the manager a few steps away from the center of the room, not far enough to become private, just far enough that people had to work a little to keep listening. That was the first choice I made that night that actually felt like mine. The manager opened the folder again on a narrow side table near the rail. The skyline was behind him, all glass and reflected lights, and below us, traffic kept moving, like nothing had changed. He pointed to the revised deposit form with the careful, neutral tone of a man who had seen weddings go strange before. "This line is only acknowledging the transfer timing," he said. "The original hold remains active tonight, unless the cardholder requests otherwise. Cardholder, not bride, not fiancé, just the person whose money would still be on the hook if the room, the vendor hours, or the attached hotel billing got messy." Nolan followed, of course. Lena too. Neither of them touched me. I asked the manager, "Was that folio finalized, or was it just in the packet?" He hesitated. "I can't explain another guest document in detail." "Was it finalized?" He gave the kind of answer people in hospitality give when policy is strangling plain English. "It appeared in the completed billing sleeve rather than the draft sleeve." That was enough. Nolan said, "You're making this worse." I turned to him. "No, I'm checking whether I'm about to keep paying for a wedding weekend with someone who can't give me one clean answer. It wasn't a wedding weekend thing." There, another change. Small, but there. Not a hotel, not his folio, just not a wedding weekend thing. "Then what was it?" I asked. He dragged a hand down his face. "A meeting that ran long." "For 2 nights?" I said I didn't stay 2 nights. The manager looked down at the papers, clearly wishing himself into another profession. I said, "Tuesday at 3:14. That's what this says." Nolan looked at me like I was being theatrical for reading numbers printed on a page. "Yes. You told me Tuesday afternoon you were still at your aunt's garage. I was there earlier. You texted me at 4:22 that you were still hauling chairs." His head jerked a little. He hadn't expected me to have the time ready. I hadn't expected it either until it came out of my mouth. But once I said it, I knew it was right. I could see the message bubble. I could see myself sitting on my office stairwell rereading it because the wording had annoyed me for reasons I couldn't then justify. Lena closed her eyes for half a second. That was enough to make me turn on her. "You remember that too?" She opened them again. "Claire." "No. Don't Claire me. Do you remember it?" She crossed her arms, which on anyone else might have looked defensive. On Lena, it meant she had moved into management mode. "Problem containment, family optics, damage distribution. I remember you complaining about him being late all week," she said. "That's not what I asked." Nolan cut in. "Can we not drag her into this?" That was interesting. He had been happy enough to let her stand next to him all night while she talked me down. But now that her silence was becoming informative, suddenly he wanted her protected. I noticed that. I noticed everything now, which made me wonder how much I had noticed before and chosen not to count. Maybe that would be one of the things people argued about later, whether I had really been blindsided or whether I had just needed a document to let myself act. I asked the manager, "If I don't sign tonight, what happens?" He answered instantly, "The event can still conclude. Future bookings and release schedules may require review." Future bookings. Release schedules. The kind of cold contract language that makes personal humiliation feel taxable. Nolan leaned closer and lowered his voice. Do not do this over one piece of paper. One piece of paper showed up because it belongs to you. It doesn't belong to what you think. That line almost made me laugh because it was so slippery. Not a denial, never a denial anyone could pin down later. Just a complaint about interpretation. He was still trying to manage the meaning without giving me facts. I looked back at the folio and saw the attached logo from the harbour annex more clearly. Same venue group, same cream stock, same formatting as our event packet. The line items were plain and mean: room rate, taxes, valet, market pantry, early check-in. Nothing lurid, nothing dramatic, just the administrative shape of a private stay. And because it was plain, it landed harder. Who was with you? I asked. No one. You booked a king room for no one. I didn't choose the room. You stayed? He paused. Only a second, but everybody saw it. The pause mattered more than the answer would have. I was in and out, he said. That phrase was awful the second it left his mouth. He heard it too. Lena actually looked away. The manager stared determinedly at the deposit sheet. Somewhere behind us, one of my cousins started talking too loudly about the dessert table, the universal family response to a public collapse nobody knows how to stop. In and out, I repeated. You know what I mean. I actually don't. He made a frustrated sound. I mean, I didn't sleep there, like you're implying. Like I'm implying. Again, same move. He would not say what he did. He would only object to what I pictured. The city breeze pushed one of the loose pages sideways. I flattened it with my hand and saw the checkout date, Thursday morning. Thursday morning was the day Lena had told me. Nolan looked exhausted because he'd been running around for us. Those exact words, for us. I looked at her. Did he tell you he was at the hotel? Her eyes widened a fraction too late. No. Did he tell you he was somewhere other than where he told me? That is not the same question. There it was, clean and terrible. Nolan said sharply. Lena. She snapped back. Don't. For the first time that night, she sounded angrier than scared. That shifted the air again. Not toward safety, toward the realization that whatever Lena knew, she had not been protecting me from pain. She had been protecting the timeline, the event, the engagement. Maybe herself, maybe the family embarrassment, maybe all of it. I said very quietly. You knew there was another version. I knew there was a work stop he didn't want to explain because he thought you'd make it bigger than it was. A hotel is already bigger. Her jaw set. You don't know that. You keep saying that. Because you don't. That should have helped him. Instead, it made me feel less alone and more betrayed at the same time. If my own sister had been drafted into pre-softening a story before I ever saw the proof, then this wasn't just bad timing. It had layers. Maybe not a full affair, maybe not a second woman, maybe not anything everyone would confidently label cheating. But there had already been decisions made around my reactions, which meant I had been managed. And managed people start sounding hysterical the second they resist. Nolan reached for my elbow. Let's go downstairs. I stepped back before he touched me. No. The manager, still trapped in our orbit, murmured, I can give you a few minutes. You've already given us plenty, I said. Then I looked at the signature line for the deposit revision, picked up the pen, and didn't sign. That was the second real choice. Nolan saw it immediately. Claire, don't punish me financially because you're embarrassed. The word embarrassed hit me so hard I almost lost my balance. Not hurt, not confused, not betrayed, embarrassed. As if the issue was that people had seen too much too early, not that I was standing over a hotel folio dated squarely inside wedding week, while my sister admitted there had always been another version of Tuesday. I set the pen down. Behind me, I could feel the room pretending to breathe again. Ahead of me, Lena looked like she wanted to say something and knew every possible sentence was dangerous. And Nolan, finally understanding I might actually walk this further than he planned for, said the one thing he should not have said. If you do this, your sister is not the only person who's going to look bad tonight. For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard him, not because the words were quiet, because they were so nakedly wrong that my brain tried to soften them before they landed. If you do this, your sister is not the only person who's going to look bad tonight. Lena stared at him. What does that mean? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, which somehow made it worse. He had not meant to say her out loud. I knew that immediately. He meant pressure. He meant collateral. He meant the family web would get ugly if I refused to keep this contained. But by naming her, he turned the whole thing sideways. I looked from him to Lena and back again. Why would she look bad? No one said she would, he said quickly. You did. That's not what I meant. Then tell me what you meant. He rubbed his forehead like the problem was language, like the trouble was that none of us appreciated how hard this was for him, to phrase delicately. I mean, if you blow up the party over this, people are going to start talking about everybody who knew what this week looked like. The sentence hung there. Everybody who knew what this week looked like. Lena went very still. That was her tell. When she got emotional, she didn't fidget. She froze and got colder. I said, how much did she know? Nolan's eyes flicked to her. Just once. It was tiny. It was enough. Lena stepped forward before he could answer. I knew you were already suspicious, and I knew he asked me to calm you down because every conversation between you two was turning into a trial. That is not an answer. It is the answer. No, it's the polished answer. The manager, who had somehow become a witness to a family crack nobody invited him to, murmured, I can leave the paperwork here. None of us acknowledged him. It felt cruel, but he was part of the scene now, whether we wanted that or not. The folder, the unsigned deposit revision, the folio with Nolan's name on it. Our engagement had been reduced to documents on a side table. Lena said, still controlled. He told me he had one stop he didn't tell you about because he knew you were already at a 10. A stop in a hotel. He said there was a client meeting attached to the property. I laughed then, one short, ugly sound. Attached to the property. That is the saddest sentence I've ever heard. It's what he told me. And you believed that? She looked at Nolan. Not me. I believed it was stupid. I did not know there was a room charge. That distinction mattered. I could feel it mattering even while I hated her for it. She had not necessarily known the worst version. She had known enough to help him shape my reactions before I had any proof. Enough to decide I needed management. Enough to stand next to him all evening like I was the unstable variable in a math problem she was solving. Nolan cut in. I asked her to help because you were spiraling days before tonight. There it was again. Spiraling. Embarrassed. He kept reaching for words that made me sound like the event, not the injury. You asked my sister to handle me, I said. I asked her to keep you from detonating over something you didn't understand. That line would have worked better if he had not already changed his explanation 4 times. Lena's voice sharpened. Stop talking about her like she's not standing here. That was the first useful thing she had said all night, and the fact that it came now, after all the rest, nearly made me angrier than if she'd stayed silent. I could feel viewers in some future version of this story splitting right there. Some would say she was trying, finally. Others would say she only stepped in once Nolan started endangering her too. Both would be true. I picked up the folio again. My hands were steady now, too steady. Tuesday at 3:14. Thursday morning checkout. Early arrival. Valet. 1 king. If this is a harmless work stop, say who the client was. Nolan's face shut down in a way I had seen maybe twice before, always when he thought withholding details made him look principled instead of cornered. I'm not naming someone from work in the middle of your family party. My family party? He said nothing. I heard Lena exhale through her nose. Nolan. No, he said, without looking at her. I'm not turning this into a public list of names. That answer didn't save him. It made the intimacy of it worse. A name withheld in public is almost louder than a name spoken. The room didn't need details. They only needed to know there was someone important enough not to say. A few guests had drifted closer under the fake pretense of checking the bar line. I could feel their attention like heat. The rooftop no longer felt open. It felt staged. I asked the manager, if I don't sign this tonight, does anything get cancelled immediately? he answered carefully. No immediate cancellation, but release timelines on future event obligations may be paused pending confirmation. Nolan swore under his breath. Claire. That was the second shift in the part. Not romance, not loyalty, not family contract. The practical teeth of the evening. The venue did not care whether he cheated. The venue cared whether the person paying still wished to guarantee the next steps. That coldness steadied me more than anything else had. Shame is slippery. Paperwork is not. Lena saw it happen and changed tactics instantly. Think for 1 minute before you do something permanent because you're angry. I turned to her. You don't get to say permanent like you weren't helping him manage me. I was trying to stop you from doing exactly this. Then congratulations. Her eyes flashed. You want honesty? Fine. I thought if you got through tonight first, you two would have one private chance to sort out whether this was ugly or unforgivable. I did not want the hotel papers surfacing in front of 100 people. That stopped me. Not because it softened her, because it clarified her. She had known enough to understand there was hotel paper. Maybe not the folio itself, maybe not the room charge, but enough to know a private chance had already been deemed necessary by somebody other than me, enough to know I was walking into a celebration built on delayed information. Nolan said, Lena. She whipped toward him. No, you don't get to use my name like a break anymore. The manager took a full step back. Smart man. I asked her, how long? She folded her arms tighter. Since Thursday. Thursday, checkout morning. The date made everything narrow into one clean blade. Thursday was when Nolan brought me coffee at work and kissed my forehead in the lobby and said the week was finally calming down. Thursday was when Lena texted me, he looks exhausted, be nice. Thursday was also, apparently, when at least one other person in my family was already handling fallout I hadn't been allowed to see. I should have cried then. Instead, I felt oddly awake. Nolan's voice dropped. This is not what you think. I almost smiled. You have said that 5 different ways and still haven't told me what it is. Because you've already chosen. No, I said. I'm choosing now. I took the deposit revision, turned it over, and wrote in the margin that cardholder approval was withheld, pending review. The manager blinked. That is sufficient for tonight. Nolan went pale. Claire, are you serious? Lena looked horrified, but not for me, for the blast radius, for the calls she would have to answer tomorrow, for the family version of events she could no longer pre-edit. That was the moment I understood something ugly and useful. Nolan had hurt me, but Lena had made me vulnerable. He gave me the lie. She gave it social insulation. And right then, on that rooftop, my sister was more dangerous than my fiancé because she knew exactly how to make my reaction look like the actual problem. Nolan reached for the paper. You are making a spectacle. I pulled it back. No, the spectacle was the toast. He stared at me for a long second, then said, low enough that only the 3 of us and the manager could hear. If you keep pushing, you are going to hear something you can't walk back. Lena's head snapped toward him. I said, that sounds like a threat. He didn't deny that fast enough. He should have denied it immediately. That was the worst part. Not the sentence itself, not even the tone. It was the beat of air after I said, that sounds like a threat, and he gave me nothing clean to work with. No, it isn't. No, that's not what I meant. No, stop twisting this. Just that split second where his face did something tight and annoyed, like the problem was that I had labelled it too accurately. Then he said, it's not a threat. It's me telling you there are facts here you clearly don't have. Then hand me one. His jaw flexed. Not like this. Lena looked sick. The manager looked invisible on purpose. Around us, the rooftop had split into 2 kinds of guests, the ones openly pretending not to watch, and the ones watching through reflections in the glass. I put the folio flat on the side table and tapped the date with one finger. Tuesday, 3:14 check-in. Thursday morning check-out. Give me one version that stays the same for longer than 30 seconds. Nolan dragged a hand over his mouth. I used the room. There it was, small but actual. Not just I was there. Not just this doesn't prove anything. I used the room. Lena closed her eyes. I said, for what? He looked at the skyline instead of me. To get away for a few hours. A few hours. Yes. Then why is it 2 nights? I told you, I don't know how the charge posted. You signed it. It was rushed. The explanation was still bad. But this time it was bad in a narrower way, which made it more believable and less comforting. I could imagine a rushed check-in. I could imagine a room held longer than used. I could imagine a man too cowardly to explain why he needed a hotel room during the exact week he was supposed to be locking in wedding details with me. That was the terrible thing. Once the story moved from impossible to ugly, it became easier to picture. I asked, "Who were you with?" "No one." "You already said that." "Because it's true." I stared at him. "Then why not tell me on Tuesday?" He looked back at me then, finally, and for the first time all night his face didn't read smooth or defensive. It read, cornered. "Because you were already sure I was cheating." That is not an answer. It is when every conversation becomes a cross-exam. I almost said something cruel. I stopped myself because I could hear how that would sound later. Like a woman proving his point. Like a fiancé who had been hunting for betrayal and finally got a document to wave around. Fewer doubt would live there. I knew it even as I stood in it. So I kept my voice flat. "You hid a hotel room from me during wedding week and asked my sister to help manage me. I asked her to keep this from becoming exactly what it is right now." Lena cut in sharply. "Stop saying manage, stop saying keep. You lied, Nolan." He turned to her. "I lied by omission because I knew how she'd take it." That landed hard because it was both incriminating and, in a twisted way, plausible. Plenty of people lie by omission because they fear the reaction more than the act. That does not make them innocent. It does make everything messier. I said, "So there was something to take." He looked exhausted suddenly. I needed space. "At a hotel?" "Yes." "With a king bed?" He made a sound of disgust. "It was a room, Claire. A room you checked into under your own name during wedding week while texting me photos from somewhere else." The manager shifted. "I truly can step away." "No," I said, without looking at him. "You're the only person here who hasn't lied to me." That earned a few quick glances from nearby guests and one tiny, involuntary wince from Lena. Nolan's voice dropped again. "You want the truth? Fine. Tuesday, I left your aunt's place because I couldn't breathe. Every second with your family that week felt like an inspection. Your sister was asking about budgets. Your mother kept changing the guest list. You were checking where I was every hour. I booked the room because I wanted one place that wasn't full of expectations." The words came out too fast at the end, like they had been waiting. Lena said, "That is not better." He rounded on her. "I know it's not better." I looked at him. "And you still didn't tell me." "No." "Why?" "Because once I said hotel, you would never hear the rest." That might have been the first honest sentence of the night. I hated that I believed at least part of it. Not enough to save him, enough to make the edges blur. A room used for cheating and a room used to escape a wedding week breakdown can look identical on paper. That was the argument he had now, and it was a dangerous one because it had just enough shape to split the room. If he had stopped there, maybe the story would have settled into one ugly, arguable lane. But he kept going. And I asked Lena to calm you down because she was the only person who understood that not every bad look is betrayal. Lena turned white. "Do not put that on me. You told me yourself she would take the worst version and run." I looked at her. She did not deny it. That was the moment the floor shifted again, not toward him, toward her. Because if she had said that, if she had privately described me as someone who would take the worst version and run, then she had not merely tried to smooth the weak, she had actively translated me to him, made me legible, made me manageable. There are few things more dangerous than a sibling who can package your flaws for the person already lying to you. I said very quietly, "Did you say that?" Lena's eyes met mine and held. "I said you were already scared. I said if he dropped something messy on you without context, you would hear only the ugliest part. Did you say I'd run with the worst version?" She hesitated. That was enough. I laughed once, under my breath. "Wow. Claire." "No, don't do the careful voice now." Nolan ran a hand through his hair. This is what I meant. There are things being said in panic that are not bigger than what's actually true. Actually true, I repeated. You hid a hotel stay. You lied about Tuesday. You pulled my sister in. You let me stand at my own engagement party and find out from billing paperwork. I did not plan for that. Congratulations. The venue manager quietly slid the unsigned revision into the folder, protecting the papers from the wind. That small act did more to make the night feel final than any speech could have. The paperwork was being put away. The party, as far as the venue was concerned, was moving from celebration to record. I picked up my bag from the stool by the rail. Nolan noticed first. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer immediately because I wasn't fully sure. Not home with him. That much was clear. Not with Lena either, which became clear the second I looked at her and saw not my sister, but the person who had spent days helping him calibrate me. "I'm leaving," I said. Nolan stepped forward. "You can't leave like this." "Looks like I can." "Claire, if you walk out now, everyone here gets to decide what happened." I held his gaze. "They already did." Lena said, "Come with me, just downstairs, 5 minutes, away from them." It almost sounded kind. But I heard the machinery under it. Downstairs meant out of sight. 5 minutes meant compression. Away from them meant back inside the family system, where reactions could be edited and redistributed. Where she was strongest. I took one step back instead. That hurt her. I could see it. Good. Maybe that was petty. Maybe viewers would think so. But I was past caring about looking gracious to people who had been coordinating around my reactions like I was the hazard. Nolan's voice went rough. "Claire, please." I looked at the folio one last time in the manager's folder, at the neat, brutal date and the stupid, neutral room charge, and said, "If your explanation was enough, you wouldn't need my sister to translate it." Then I turned toward the elevator lobby. Behind me, I heard Lena say my name and Nolan say, "Let her go." He sounded like he meant for the night. He might have only meant for 10 minutes. I didn't turn around to check. The elevator took too long. That was the first thing I remember clearly once I left the side table. Not the skyline, not the cold air, not whether anybody tried to stop me between the rooftop and the hall. Just the fact that the elevator seemed determined to arrive slowly enough for second thoughts, and I was suddenly surrounded by the dull, reflected version of myself in mirrored doors. I could still hear the party behind me through the wall and the open corridor. Not words, just the shape of it. Music trying to restart. Voices lowered into false softness. The sound people make when they decide a public disaster is now private enough to discuss. My phone started vibrating before the elevator reached my floor. Nolan first, then Lena, then Nolan again. I looked at the screen and did nothing. The doors opened onto the lobby level of the attached property, all stone, tile, and quiet lamps, and that made the whole thing feel even meaner. Same logo as the folder, same cream paper at the host stand, same branded calm. Somewhere in the same building group, a room had been booked under my fiancé's name during wedding week, and upstairs, a rooftop party under my card had just come apart because the paperwork crossed paths at exactly the wrong moment. Or maybe exactly the honest moment. That question stayed with me all the way across the lobby. The front desk clerk glanced up when I passed, probably because I was carrying an evening bag and moving like someone trying not to sprint. I almost stopped. I almost asked whether the harbour annex could confirm whether the room had actually been occupied both nights or whether the charges had just posted that way. But I didn't. Not because I suddenly trusted Nolan, because I already knew enough to change what needed changing tonight. That was the line I drew for myself before anyone else could redraw it. Outside, the air was warmer than it had been on the roof. I stood under the awning and called a car. My hand shook once while I typed my home address, then steadied when I deleted it and put in a hotel near my office instead. Not the attached hotel. I could not have survived that level of symbolism. Lena called again. This time I answered. "Don't tell me to calm down," I said before she could speak. She was quiet for a moment. I wasn't going to. I leaned against the stone column and watched a couple in party clothes laugh too loudly while they waited for valet. Normal strangers. Intact strangers. Then what? I was going to tell you not to go home with him. That landed strangely. Protective in content, rotten in timing. I wasn't planning to. Good. Is that supposed to fix something? No. At least that was honest. Traffic hissed past on the street below. Somewhere above us, a rooftop door opened and shut. I could imagine the room still orbiting the exact spot by the rail where the black folder had sat, people acting like they were discussing logistics while cataloguing every facial expression for later. I said, "How long were you going to let me walk around tonight without telling me there was hotel paperwork?" She breathed in slowly. I didn't know there was paperwork. I knew there was a hotel. I shut my eyes. Hearing it clean was almost worse than discovering it piece by piece. Not because it changed the facts. Because it removed her last layer of softness. You knew there was a hotel. Yes. And you still spent all week telling me I was making things up. I told you I thought you were collapsing 10 different bad signs into one worst-case story. You were helping him. I was trying to get you through the party first. There should not have been a party first. She didn't answer that, which was answer enough. My car was 7 minutes away. Her silence made me think of all the other spaces this week where she had probably chosen silence and called it strategy. The coffee she dropped off Wednesday morning, the way she'd said Nolan seemed stressed, not shady, the way she stood beside him tonight like she was buffering static. None of that looked sisterly to me anymore. It looked tactical. Maybe she would say I was unfair. Maybe she'd be partly right. People do terrible things in the name of preserving one evening, one contract, one family image. They call it timing. They call it waiting until emotions cool. They call it helping. But if the waiting always benefits the liar, then it is not neutral. She said carefully, I did not know if he cheated. That was the first sentence that mattered. Not because it cleared him, because it clarified the argument. We were no longer fighting over whether the hotel existed. We were fighting over whether secrecy itself was enough to break something. I still don't know if he cheated, I said. I know, but he lied. Yes, you lied. She took that harder than I expected. I could hear it in the way her next breath caught. I covered for him. That's lying. Yes, I opened my eyes and watched a bus move through the intersection like a lit aquarium. I thought about the folio again. Tuesday, 3:14, 2 nights, 1 king, early arrival. Those details would probably live in my body for years, even if some future accounting explanation turned one corner of them less damning. That was what Nolan never understood. Intimacy damage does not need a witness in the room. Sometimes all it needs is paperwork that hands the room a picture they cannot unsee. Lena said, he told me he panicked. People panic before cheating too. I know. You keep saying that now. Because now I have to. That almost made me laugh. Bitterly, but still. The car updated to 5 minutes away. She lowered her voice. He's telling people you needed air. Of course he is. I told him to stop talking. Did he? No. I pictured him upstairs, already trying to frame the evening in safer language. Needed air, bad timing, misunderstanding, stress. Maybe he was telling the truth as he understood it. Maybe he really had booked a room just to be alone and then lied because the optics were awful. Maybe there was another person entirely and he was still counting on the lack of a name to keep the argument muddy. Either way, the social shape was the same now. Our engagement had split publicly. My sister had stepped off his side too late to look clean. The venue had my withheld approval on file, and everyone who mattered had watched the document surface during the toast instead of hearing about it in some quiet, redeemable way later. That was the consequence, not a neat confession. Not a solved puzzle, a shift. I booked a room, I said. Lena was silent again. Then, good. Do not tell him where. I won't. I believed her. Which annoyed me. Belief had become such a stupid, unstable thing in one night. My bag's still upstairs, I said. I'll get it. That should have felt kind too. It did not. It felt like another administrative role in a mess she helped build. Still, I let her have it. Leave it at the front desk under my name. I will. A pause. Then she said, Claire. I almost ended the call. Instead, I waited. I am not on his side. I looked up at the building, at the warm windows and expensive rooftop where half our future had just been converted into party gossip and contract review. "You were," I said. And that was the truest sentence I had all night. My car pulled up. I got in without looking back through the glass doors. Nolan called one more time as we pulled away. I let it ring until the screen went dark. I still did not know exactly what happened in that room. That part remained ugly and arguable and incomplete. But I knew enough to understand that the engagement everyone had come to celebrate no longer existed in the form they thought it did. It had been replaced by something colder, a man whose explanations shifted under pressure, a sister who decided timing mattered more than truth, and a venue file that now reflected my hesitation as clearly as his name. By the time I checked into my own room across town, the ring felt heavier than it had that morning. I took it off and set it on the nightstand, not as a final act, not as a clean ending, but as the first thing I had done all week that did not need anybody else's permission.